Jerit for the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com with Andrew Lopez, where we just finished a 4-game day on the first of 2 weekends of state championship football games.
We started on Friday. It is now Saturday.
Yeah, it's about 1 a.m. Saturday morning. We kicked off the Division IV state championship at 10 a.m. Friday morning, and it quickly went against Southern Lab. It looks like they just didn't quite wake up for that early game. They lose 52-6. And what really caught you about that one?
Yeah, I was much. I mean, I thought that game was going to be a lot closer than what it was. Southern Lab seemed to, when the lights came on, it seemed like everything seemed to go bad for them. They had a total of 5 turnovers. I think they fumbled 7 different times. I think 3 of those were recovered by Ouachita Christian, who ended up winning that game 52-6. Ouachita Christian really blew things open in the second quarter, 32 points. You know, Clowers, he ended up being the most outstanding player of that game. 12 of 21, 204 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, added 35 and a touchdown on the ground. Can't say enough about that defense, though. Forcing all those turnovers, obviously. Cade spikes, 6 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and I think a fumble recovery. Maybe I think that might have flipped that around, but still, he had a very outstanding day. What do you think happened with the with Lab today?
I'm really not sure, because we talked earlier in the week with Coach Mitchell, and he said the 10 a.m. start concerned him a little bit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Ouachita Christian was here 2010, 11, and 12, and so some of those guys had made this trip before and had a little bit better sense of what to expect maybe than Southern Lab did. But after the game, he brushed off both those and said regardless, they weren't going to make excuses, right, and they just didn't execute. And if you look at their defense, they were really aggressive, and Ouachita Christian made the most of that by using some screens and misdirections and getting some over pursuit and all kinds of space to make some things work. And then offensively, Southern Lab just never got going. You mentioned that 32 points. Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably a record for a quarter. They don't have that in the media guide, but last year we saw all those record-setting performances: Vermilion Catholic, Calvary Baptist, Acadiana, all maxed out at 21 points in a quarter. So add 11 to that, and yeah, you're just getting to what OCS did in the second quarter. The second game was the complete opposite. It was the competitive game that we expected. Calvary Baptist gets a win, as they did in last year's semifinals. This one was 27-24 against Catholic New Iberia. And what did you think about the clash of those two styles in a game of two really good teams?
Right, Calvary Baptist, seemed like every time that Catholic New Iberia, would come in and try to tie the game, Calvary would pull away. They would answer. I think it was tied at 7-7. I think it was tied at 17-17, and it was tied again at 24-24. Catholic New Iberia just couldn't get anything going after they got the stops that they need. After they got the big stop there at the end, forcing Calvary into that field goal, they go to the spread. This is a team that is running the option. They go to the spread, and Pellerin in the center have a little bit of a problem on 2 of those snaps. Coach Indes decides not to call those timeouts, and kind of, Calvary takes that win. Shea Patterson had a great game for Calvary. I think 233 yards, 2 touchdowns for him. Orlando Bradford doesn't put up the monstrous numbers that he had last year, but a 109 and 1 for him. It was a very overall, it was a good game, and it kind of set us up for the Division II and Division I games.
Yeah, I guess you hit on a lot of things in Division III. Going into Division II, it starts out 14-0 in favor of Parkview Baptist in a game a lot of folks thought maybe could be the most lopsided game of the day in favor of U High, just because folks had seen a 28-7 game earlier in the year that U High won, and
one when they really weren't healthy either. Which
right.
really made allow people to think that this could have been that 52-6 game that we saw earlier.
And then last year in the playoffs was a pretty lopsided affair in favor of U High as well. Parkview onside kicks right off the bat, and then they're able to force some turnovers, which had been their issue in some of the earlier matchups. But back comes U High in real interesting fashion.
Yeah, I was really impressed in this game with Nick Brissett and the job that he did, considering he had 2 first-half fumbles. I think he might have had 73 yards at the halftime. He finishes with 272 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. I think he even had more total yards because he had a 25-yard screen pass, I think, at one point. Also very impressed with Manny Miles today. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, maybe because of his last name. but 14 to 20, 193 yards. You know, U-High really put up a lot of offense. And I have to mention Will Keller, who I voted for as the most outstanding player for that game. 3 blocks, 2 of those are game changers, really. You know, the first block, Dylan Moses recovers for a touchdown and allows it to get to 14-14. And then U-High, he blocks another one, 15 seconds left before halftime, that sends U-High into the break 16-14. That was a real big momentum shift for them.
That's where it all kind of started to come alive. Manny Miles had already hit Trey Jackson to cut the lead in half. Trey Jackson ends up being the single-season receiving yardage record holder after today for U-High in terms of the school's records. And then the Dylan Moses recovery ties it, and then Will Keller sends his third punt block out the back of the end zone for a safety, and they take their first lead. Parkview certainly didn't give up. They come back and they score, and they take a lead. And yeah, Houston Robert, the Rice commitment. 6
catches, 168 yards, 3 touchdowns, 17 carries, 63 yards, a touchdown on the ground. I know he's going to Rice to play safety. I might have to put the ball in his hands if I'm them.
Yeah, he can do a lot of things and has done a lot of things for those guys on both sides of the ball. He's got a lot of speed. That's Coach Maya talked about how fast he was for them, and how in these matchups you look and you might take for granted what U-High has and some of those athletes, and that Houston is one of the few guys that Parkview had that they felt like they could have on any team and be like that type of a guy.
And then we have the big game, kind of one that everybody was looking for. They put a lot of people in the stands tonight. Jesuit defeats Curtis 27-24. Just an all-around sound, fundamental game by Jesuit that kind of won this thing for them tonight.
Yeah, we came out of the Division II post-game and look up, and there's just white and blue shirts everywhere. I think Jesuit said they sold nearly 7,000 tickets at school earlier in the week, and then there were clearly a lot more than 7,000 people there because they were selling tickets elsewhere as well. And yeah, you know, it was a real physical game. Everyone always expects Curtis to win a state championship. People talk about the golden rule when we're picking games, that you never bet against Curtis. And folks knew that Jesuit was a really good team, and they really showed it. What impressed you most about what they were able to do against this Curtis team?
They forced Curtis to go away from Curtis football. I think I talked about this at halftime with you. If you would have told me before the game that Miles Washington would have more completions and more attempts than Trey LaForge, I would think that would spell not a good game for Curtis, because that would mean that they were having to play catch up and they were having to get out of their element. And you know, Miles goes, you know, he throws 17 passes, Trey throws 14. It just was not that type of game. Now Miles showed great touch on the ball. He made some great throws, especially late in the fourth quarter. Maybe there was a fumble call in the fourth quarter that really went against Curtis. The referee had signaled Curtis ball. Another official comes in, says he had a better view. They switched the call on the field, and it just seemed like that took all the momentum out, because maybe a few minutes before that, Curtis had fumbled again, but they were able to stop. It seemed like they still had a little bit in them. It just seemed like that last fumble just really took the wind out of them.
And it ends the streak of state championships that Curtis had. This was Jesuit's first time back since 1978. They get a state championship for the first time since 1960. I mean, what a good story for those guys. Right,
absolutely. And I mean, they, like I said, sound game all around. Charles Jackson, 16 carries, 142 yards. I can't say enough about, you know, the way they played tonight.
Sounds good. Well, again, for Andrew, Lopez, Jerit, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com.